This week on the Hollywood in Toto podcast, this veteran actor has had enough, and his rant is glorious. We talked to Andy Erwin, one of the biggest players in the faith-based movie movement, about his new podcast. It's called The Storytellers. It's really good. And I share a personal update about my biggest weakness as an entrepreneur, and I'm going to guess some of you out there can relate to what I'm going through.
Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast. Entertainment news and reviews without the woke Hollywood narrative. Free speech, free expression. Now that's entertainment. And here's your host, award-winning film critic, Christian Toto.
Before we kick things off, I'd love it if you'd subscribe to the Hollywood in Toto podcast. We get new episodes every Wednesday, plus bonus episodes, and a update on what's going on with our video collection as well. And if you like what you hear, could you give us a review over at iTunes? Just a few words or two, a couple of syllables smashed together. Everything helps. We appreciate it. Chazz Palminteri has had enough. The New York actor is known for playing gritty characters on screen, big and small. You've seen him on Modern Family. Of course, A Bronx Tale is his best-known film. But now he's a podcaster who shares his life and stories on YouTube. Not too unconventional there, and he's also not a partisan guy. He doesn't get involved with politics. It's just not his style. It's not his brand. But he couldn't stay silent forever. He just couldn't. He's fed up with illegal immigration, the crime, the chaos, all the money that's pouring into illegal immigrants right now. That money could help the homeless in America, or U.S. military veterans, or our senior citizens. Instead, it's going to the rule breakers.
Folks, I don't know what to say here. I don't know what to say. Are we all stupid? Are we all crazy? This has got to end. It's got to end, folks. Come on. Please. You know, we talk about Social Security and welfare. We talk about Medicare, that it's all going to be gone by the year 2030. All you got to do is stop paying all these illegal people coming in and put it in that pot where the Americans are.
Our culture is heading to a breaking point. I don't see any other way to say it, any way around it. It's that simple. We can't shop for toothpaste without having the clerk unlock the cabinet. We can't educate our kids because the schools are overrun by the woke mind virus, as Elon Musk so eloquently put it. And of course, we can't close our borders, and the fallout from that, I think it's only begun. It's going to get much, much worse. Now again, Chazz doesn't want to get his hands dirty in the culture wars, but he couldn't stay silent. Nor should he. But I think he should ask himself some questions and start with this one. How did he vote in the last election? All right, let's face it. The GOP, as it's currently constituted, deeply flawed. Have you seen the Republican standard bearer? He's got a few flaws too. Just a few. Maybe a few more. Sorry. It's just reality. But so much of the insanity we're facing right now, so much of what's going on in our culture can be directly tied to today's Democratic Party. It's that simple. Now, let's hear what Chazz has to say. Let's let other people start speaking out. And, most importantly, you got to start voting accordingly. It's that simple. Here's this week's movie trivia question. Well, everyone's talking about Ghostbusters again. The new film Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is out in theaters now. And of course, that makes us want to think about the original, the 1984 film Ghostbusters. I just want to watch it again, just even mentioning the name. And it had so many great classic lines, so many great moments. Of course, the cast is exceptional. But one of the quips in the film from Bill Murray suggests that the end of the world is coming soon, and it should scare everyone silly. How bad could it be? Well, Murray's character insists these natural-born enemies might even join forces in the maelstrom. What is the classic line we're referring to here? The answer? At the end of the show. You want to know why faith-based movies are having a moment right now? Well, you can pin some of the blame on Andy Erwin. Andy and his brother John, well, they earned it. And he helped bring movies like I Can Only Imagine, American Underdog, The Jesus Revolution, and most recently, Ordinary Angels to the big screen. He's been there from the start with his brother. Of course, they're called the Erwin brothers, and they're called that for a reason. They work together, they make good movies together, and they are a key part of this revolution. I'll call it that. But now Andy's taking a step back just for a moment. He's still working hard. That's not ending. But he's been chatting with some of the most important artists of our time, the folks that are in this movement, but also out of this movement as well. Andy hosts the Storytellers podcast. It's brand new, but gives him a chance to sit down with some really long conversation, deep dive chats with people like Roma Downey, Patricia Heaton, Dennis Quaid, and much more. He says he's got a whole lineup filled of people he'll be talking to very soon. Now, I've sampled it, and it's really good. Andy is one of those people who knows exactly the kinds of questions that are going to make his guests open up. That's the trick. That's the secret. And I hope I did the same during my chat with Andy Erwin. You can judge for yourself, but just know, somebody like Andy, he doesn't disappoint. Andy, thanks for joining the show. I want to start with the obvious question is, you're a pretty busy person. You've got a lot of projects, and I'm sure this is a passion project to do the Storytellers podcast, but when you add something to your workload, I'm an entrepreneur. I know how hard that can be. What was that particular decision like? What was that journey like? Because you've got enough on your plate, but obviously this was near and dear to your heart.
The curse of being a creative, I mean, you know this. The curse of being a creative is you don't have a lot of control over what you get obsessed with. And it's that splinter in your brain when something creatively sparks something and you're like, ooh, I want to do that. And you're like, how do I add that to all the other stuff? And then that's where the kind of the massive multi-car pileup starts. But it's kind of a problem that I think the 21-year-old version of me would pray for. Is the idea of having too many stories to get to tell, at a time where I didn't know if we'd ever get a chance to tell one, to be having different. And I think to be in a point, culturally where there's different avenues to explore that didn't exist 10, 15 years ago. I've been obsessed with learning and I just get curious and then you got to figure out how to make space for it. But multitasking is my new, year's resolution this year of learning how to multitask better.
Gotcha. I think you could maybe talk to my wife because she gets frustrated with all the different projects I'm juggling. Now, obviously, you've got the storyteller part down cold. You've been doing that for quite a while, and you're very good at it, obviously. But hosting a show like this, having the conversations, that's a different kind of learning curve as well. But what's been the most intriguing part so far for you? I know it's a fairly new journey with this particular show, but what are the takeaways for you as a storyteller, as an artist as well?
Yeah, for me, curiosity, it's just the idea of I get to spend an hour with some of my heroes or people that have inspired our career and find out what inspired theirs and find out where their stories kind of came from. My father was in talk radio when I was a kid. And so I used to grow up just sitting in the engineering room, doing my baseball cards while my dad did his show. And so the idea of kind of getting back to like a talk radio kind of thing was like, oh, that's fun. And so when we were talking about, like, we've focused so much on the stories that we're telling on the big screen that we haven't had a very good conversation with the audience and letting them feel a part of it and get to know the human beings behind the products that are made. And so we're like, well, I may not be very interesting, but I got a lot of cool friends. And so what if we just invited them to kind of be a part of this and it's a fly on the wall conversation, let them, have fun, explaining their story and the, behind the scenes stuff that we may not know. And then also just have a little bit of fun talking about movie nostalgia. And so I just started texting my friend list, and the first season of 30 episodes filled up within about 10 days.
Nice.
And everybody said yes. And I was like, I think we're booked into season 2 at this point. And, so the first episode's Dennis Quaid, then it's Candace Cameron Bure. And then, we got, the episode that just released today is Randall Wallace, the writer of Braveheart and writer-director of We Were Soldiers. Dallas Jenkins is in a few weeks. We've already recorded his. I got to interview Alejandro Monteverde from Sound of Freedom. For me to sit down. So in fact, the Randall Wallace one, it was amazing because I just started releasing the first few episodes and I get a text from Randall Wallace and he's like, hey, the storytellers thing, when is my episode?
That's right.
And I was like, Randall, whenever the heck you want.
That's right.
And so I booked his episode, and I just sat down with him, and for me to just pick his brain about like the genesis of Braveheart and where he got the story and where he was at in his personal life when he found that. And I didn't realize like he started out as a live singer at Opryland in Nashville with a live animal show that he was in charge of with a pig co-host named Pigarachi. And I'm like, to go from that to writing the most iconic film of all time in Braveheart, where does that come from? And it was just fascinating to go on the journey with him.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. You're doing you're doing the podcast, and you're learning, and you're growing, and you're having these great conversations. But I think there's a benefit here potentially for you in that, you know, all feedback is interesting, and as a storyteller, you want to learn and grow and prosper, and you've done that over your career. Do you find that you're picking up clues or bits of information or just knowledge that you can't wait to apply to your next film? Like you can actively learn this and then apply it there as far as the films you do? And any examples?
Absolutely.
You know, how does that work?
You know, for me, you know, good artists create, but great artists steal. And so the idea of sitting down with these artists that are great artists and comparing notes. Mm-hmm. And I've been obsessed with other things that have done that well. Like I've learned more from the Hollywood Reporter roundtable interviews that they do at the award season than anything else I've done in my career. Like I watch that and I obsess over it. I'm like, ooh, I'm stealing that, you know? And so when I sit down with, you know, both, you know, actors, but also, you know, really good filmmakers and just kind of gleaning their story. Mm-hmm. There's something that's, number one, very validating about the common struggle we've all been on and been in, and that imposter syndrome never goes away. But the second thing is like finding I think not just on techniques of how to do the craft, but how to navigate this nutty business. And, you know, I had Patricia Heaton on, and, you know, 3-time Emmy award winning actress. And I just was like, Patty, I've been obsessed with somebody that has not just been on one hit TV show, but two that are in syndication. You've won 3 Emmys. Both shows ran 9 years each. And what do you do when the moment passes? Because it's like you can't hold on to this moment of success. And no matter how hard we work, all of us are going to end up at some point in our career where people point back at us and be like, oh, you did that show way back or you did that movie way back in you know, my grandparents, you know, loved you or whatever. And at some point we're all kind of geared towards that. How do you deal with it? And she just was real vulnerable. It's like, it's the hardest thing in the world to wake up and it not be there anymore. But you can't define yourself at the highs of success or the lows of when it's quiet. You have to find your value outside of what you do. And then she just talked about how she had found value doing World Vision and all these philanthropic kind of endeavors. And I was like, oh, that's how you make this thing last, is it's about loving the stories you tell, working with people you enjoy, and then finding something that has a deeper meaning that kind of gives you definition apart from this craft. And I was like, that's what's sustainable.
That's a great conversation. That was one of my favorites so far. I was listening literally last night to Roma Downey, your chat with her, and she had a quote that was just so interesting. You obviously talking about faith-friendly, whatever label you want to affix to it, stories. And she said, we're no longer whispering. I thought, wow, it's such an interesting conversation. Yeah. Can you expand on that? Because I mean, I want people to listen to the whole conversation and go back to that show, but we're here, we're now. What do you tease out of that? Because I just thought that was such a profound thought.
Well, Roma's definitely the best of us. Like, if there was ever anybody in faith film that had qualified for sainthood at this point, it would be Saint Roma. And you know, and I mean that in all sincerity. Like, she absolutely is the best of us. But I remember distinctly that I had just done my first movie, October Baby, and we talk about this in the interview. But I sat in the audience for Variety had a Faith and Film Summit in LA, and I sat there, and Mark Burnett marches out with Roma, and he was the keynote, and he debuted footage of the Bible miniseries that they were doing at that moment, and was like bold about like we're going to do something that boldly proclaims what we believe.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first moment in my career that I had seen like somebody that had a mainstream reputation that leveraged it all for the eternal. And that was a bold moment. But up to that point, any of us that were in faith, it was kind of a whisper around the edges where we just had to kind of be smart so we didn't get ostracized or blackballed for our beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And then Roma and them planted the flag, and we all kind of followed them into kind of the battlefield. But to be at this moment in time where a lot of us started all at the same time, from the Dallas Jenkins and the John Guns and the Brent McCorkles and my brother and I and the Kendrick brothers and Devon Franklin, my partner Kevin Downs, all those people, we all started around the same time. Alejandro Monteverde and Eduardo. And we were all trying to figure it out. But to be in a moment in time where now it's all working and we're able to do things with, big actors and the support of the studios, and we're not whispering anymore. And I think when Roma said that in the interview, like, I think I fell out of my chair. I was like, that's it. And like, we're the modern rebels. We've become the people that are, to do hope-filled stories has become counterculture, and we've become the Martin Scorsese rebel unit. And it's an exciting time to be in faith.
What does that mean to you as a storyteller? What does that open up for you? I mean, obviously, maybe A-list actors will be knocking on your door. Maybe bigger budgets for sure. I'd imagine it's a wonderful fallout as well. But what else does it mean? Because this is your baby. This is what you've been part of, this elite group of creators who have changed the game. What do you see next, or what could you envision for yourself?
Well, I think the hopes of the podcast is in a similar vein. Mm-hmm. Is for those of us that are kind of having a moment right now. There wasn't a blueprint for us to follow. There were a few people blazing a trail in front of us that all lead back to Mel Gibson, but Mel, Mark, and Roma, those had kind of blazed the trail. The Kendrick brothers, but for those of us that kind of followed that first round, we were trying to figure it out as we went along. My hope and my desire of where we're at now is, and like you said, there's the availability, like with Ordinary Angels, having, two-time Oscar winner Hilary Swank in the cast, and for it to be certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. It's 86% with the critics and 99% with the audience. John Gunn delivered a fantastic A+ cinema score film. That's great, and that's awesome. But my hope is for us to expand into, how do we invest in the next round, the next generation? Who are the people in the race behind us that we need to turn around and hand the baton to? Mm-hmm. And we have not been good because we've been so tribal in faith film for so long. I think that we haven't done a good job of having a long-term vision. We're just fighting for each of our individual moment now. And I think at this point in time, there's a group of us that we're starting to look backwards and be like, okay, how do we help the next round? How do we look for investing in the next generation so that this is sustainable? Mm-hmm. My hope for a storyteller podcast like this is for those that want to tell stories to find a resource where they can say, hey, that's the kind of story I want to tell. And oh my gosh, this is how these people did it. And maybe I can emulate or reinvent or gain some insight into how to find my own stories to tell. And we just kind of keep this thing snowballing forward.
You mentioned before that Patricia Heaton was so vulnerable in that conversation, and she was, and it was beautiful.
Yeah. Have
you found it hard to be vulnerable yourself, where you open up? I mean, podcasting is such a personal medium, and it can feel confessional, and I think the bond you have with your audience is unique and special. Even more so, I grew up on radio. It sounds like you did as well. It's even more so than that. Has that been a difficult transition? Have you leaned into that? Is that something that comes naturally to you? I mean, you're telling other people's story, maybe not yours, your own. What's that been like?
Well, I think it's been refreshing for me to have that opportunity as well. I've been on a journey of self-discovery myself, and over the past year and a half in particular. You really get to a point in your career where you're just like, okay, things we're doing, they're working, but long-term, what's the point? Like, what are we doing this for? And how do I really be completely honest with who I am in the process? And, I think the most powerful stories do come out of the place that's super personal. And I think, the stories we tell do reflect the soul of the person we're striving to be. But I think I'm at a point in my life where I've kind of gotten more comfortable with my warts and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and just saying, like, I'm an imperfect person that desperately needs redemption every day myself. And rather than being a public person and a private person, I've tried to just blend those into one. And so, for me, the most powerful experiences that I've had as a filmmaker came out of places of failure. And, we didn't find our movie and our story, and I Can Only Imagine, until we had gone through the box office loss of Woodlawn. And it was in that moment where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this anymore. And in that moment of defeat, so much of what drives us as storytellers is this idea of insecurity, of what will people think of me. And as long as you're holding onto the boat saying, I don't want people to judge me if I can't make it to shore, you're always going to play things safe and not going to do stories that really matter. But on I Can Only Imagine, I just finally was like, you know what? I'm going to let go of the boat and swim. And if I drowned, I drowned. And I kind of accepted my fate that I'm already dead, man. I'm just going to try to swim for shore. And all of a sudden, out of that came this moment that was unexpected. And I think there was a freedom to that. And so I just wanted to kind of I try to be a safe person. And I think the key to the people that are saying yes to the podcast is these are people that really, I think I would say, trust me. Yeah. And because I'm not going to try to make them look stupid. But as a result, you get really, like the interview from last week, KJ Appa. KJ was just talking about his life post Riverdale, and like he's known nothing but dramatic noise and success for the majority of his career, because that show was such a phenomenon. It's ended, and he's just talking about the challenge of that transition, and he was really vulnerable with it. I was proud of him, and so I try to be that safe person, but in return, I think it's an exchange. That as I'm vulnerable, I think the guest is vulnerable, and then people are privy to a conversation that they may never hear anywhere else.
You've already had some great guests on the show. It sounds like you've got a lot more lined up. Are there dream guests maybe down the road that you don't know if you have them in your Rolodex? You don't know if you can make the connection, but gosh, if you could only get them on the show, you'd love to chat with them for an hour. Who makes that list?
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at my wish list right now. I think Bono would be one I desperately would want to talk to. Matthew McConaughey. I'm really good friends with Chris Pratt, but I'd love to talk him into sitting down with me. He's definitely one I'm very, very interested in. And then Mark Wahlberg is another one. And then the one that I would just absolutely adore sitting down with an hour for is Mel Gibson. And so, working my way that way, I think that we will get every single one of those as guests at some point. But you just kind of take it one stage at a time. And so hopefully those are coming soon.
Before we let you go, Andy, any last thoughts on, you're a creator, you've had hits, you've had misses, you're at such an interesting stage in your career. If someone was just starting out and they had some of the fire in their belly like you have, or maybe you had, this is a unique fire when you're 20 something that you can't really replicate, but what would you tell them? How would you inspire them to kind of keep pushing forward at an industry where it's cruel? You know it all too well. Even the big success stories like you have, there are failures, there are moments. What kind of wisdom would you share with that kind of person?
I remember when I was 21 and first getting into the business, and I'm like, I'm going to be the youngest. I'm going to be the next, Spielberg and all this stuff. And then life has a way of kind of dictating its own terms, and you have to kind of come to terms at this interesting tension and handoff from ambition to experience. And when I was mixing American Underdog, I was on the Sony soundstage, and there's four sound stages there, four mixing studios there on stage 6, and I was in one. Denzel Washington was mixing his film that he directed on the next stage. Then Michael Mann from Heat was he was mixing his TV series across the hallway, and then the fourth stage was Jason Reitman, and he was test screening Ghostbusters. And I'm sitting there, and I texted a friend, and I said, who's the imposter on this scenario? And then he texted back and he said, well, honestly, all four of you.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it never goes away. And so this idea that I'm going to achieve a certain level of story that validates me, that says I've arrived, I'm an artist, all that type stuff, it never happens. What happens is there's moments along the way that you do a story that's deeply satisfying, and the moment will come and go. It won't last. And finding value of who you are in the journey is what makes you a good storyteller, not a moment of success.
Wow.
And so what I would encourage myself is that.
I love that. That's a great lesson. And it's something that I think when you have the artistic ability and the humility, I think that's a dangerous, and I say that in a good way, combination. But Andy, you've proven that year after year, story after story. And now, of course, the Storytellers Podcast. It's available on iTunes or your favorite audio platform. And don't forget Andy's latest film, Ordinary Angels. If it's not in a theater near you, you can pre-order it on Amazon or other VOD platforms. It's excellent. And I always want to sneak in this one because I loved it so much. American Underdog. It's so good. It's such a wonderful story. It came out during the pandemic. It didn't get the love it really deserves. So if you haven't seen that one yet, fix it. Go stream it somewhere. It's excellent. Andy, thanks so much. And I guarantee we'll be talking again about new projects.
I love it. Anytime you invite me on, I'm there, my friend.
No one, and I mean no one, procrastinates like yours truly. I am the champ, the gold medalist. I put important things off all the time. Little things, big things, things I know I can get done easily, or things that are just weighing on my mind, and I understand there's a huge learning curve involved with them. And that's why this podcast hasn't been a video podcast for so long. But that will be changing. I really promise this time. I finally teamed up with my son. He's 15 years old. And together he taught me how to cut and paste a video and slap it up on YouTube. So there's 2 new YouTube videos on my Hollywood in Toto channel right now. Finally. Oh, it's been on my mind forever. I've been losing sleep over it. And I've also been promising you, my listeners, that this is going to go video very soon. Well, now it's finally close, really. I'm actually going on vacation very soon, so when I get back, it's full steam ahead. But I just want to share that with you just to kind of give you a sense of what's going on behind the scenes here. But also, I think this is something that really does transcend all the Hollywood blather that I do on a weekly basis. Don't put things off. Tackle your fears. Go for it. Just meet them headway. I know it's scary. I've been scared about this process. Listen, it's not a monster. I'm not starving to death. I'm not like I can't feed my family. But this has really just been absolutely obsessing my mind. I can't get around it, but I finally faced it. I finally dug in. And of course, it helps to have a teenager in your house who knows what you can do with this kind of equipment and all this technology. So that's what making YouTube videos has been for me. Just this immense issue that I couldn't get around, that I couldn't stop thinking about, that I couldn't stop postponing. Well, I finally did it. So I hope you check out the new videos on YouTube and Rumble. I'll be there both when I put out new videos. And just know there is a learning curve with this process. I think I hit the ground running more or less. You'll have to decide for yourself, but trust me, the best is yet to come. Be patient, be kind, but I really want to give really good content and excellent commentary on my YouTube channel. I hope you like it. Oh, and about that trivia question, the great Bill Murray in Ghostbusters was warning the New York City officials that without the Ghostbusters, if you don't have them answering the call, as it were, the Big Apple could face a dystopian nightmare. How bad could it be? Well, here's how bad.
Rising from the grave. Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. Enough!
Well, that's it for the show this week. Thanks again to Radio America for having me as part of their great podcast lineup. Really top-line talent behind the scenes there at Radio America. Chicks on the Right, just to name a few, Dana Lash, great stuff. But, of course, while I have your attention, I hope you'll drop by HollywoodInToto.com. I update it 7 days a week. You've got news and reviews and commentary on everything that's going on and going wrong in Hollywood. It is, like the show, the right take on entertainment, and woke-free since 2014. I will see you next time.